Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Matty B, going over the NFL Draft. And let's get right into it, Matt. Who or what team was your biggest winner in the draft?
Well, I think by and far, without playing a snap, I like what Pittsburgh did overall. I think they upgraded the positions that they needed to, and if they get three or four guys that contribute, it's a slam dunk.
I kind of like the Chargers. I thought that they ended up with a lot of guys that I liked overall, and so I'd probably lean with them. I saw a couple of ratings that had them fairly high compared to some of the other teams, but I just don't know how much it's going to really pay off for them because it all depends on how Herbert keeps developing at quarterback. That's going to be their main thing. And is it going to be enough to take some of these draft picks and push them to the next level? But some people were really high on the Bears. What did you think of them? Because I think everything hinges on their Justin Fields draft.
Yeah, that was kind of the pick that I know it had come out that he was dealing with some seizure issues. That I don't know if it was even it's obviously a medical concern, but if he's addressing it and is doing stuff with his doctor, then I think he should be fine. I mean, like we've talked with a lot of these quarterbacks, I think even we had as many drafted as there were, I don't know how many are plug and play guys that step right in day one are going to be successful in systems that they're drafted in. I think all of them are going to take some lumps in the early part of the year as they transition from NFL to college.
And that's where, I liked Fields. I also liked Haskins last year, and I think a lot of his issues were off the field. And so the fact that the Steelers ended up getting him, is he able to turn around and focus it? I don't know. I don't think Fields has those same issues, but you really don't know because some of the college stuff just gets brushed away. Look at what's happened at LSU. So we'll see if he's able to focus. The doctors, like you said, that's pretty much spot on. If he's able to fight through and not have it affect his play, I really don't think it would be an issue. And I think a lot of people are putting them pretty high just because he was assumed to be the potential number 3 pick. They get him late in, pick 11 or something. So that's right around where a lot of quarterbacks have been, the money picks lately. But not that many drafts have 3 quarterbacks taken in the first 3 picks. So I don't know if you're really going to see that much of an impact. I didn't like their Trubisky pick. They traded up. And so that's the one thing that kind of, you bring in Andy Dalton, say he's your starter, draft Justin Fields. Those are 2 different style quarterbacks. So what direction are you going with? How are you winning the draft? I don't understand. I think that the Bears are just going to continue to be a mess on offense. And I don't think Fields has anything to do with it. It's just the fact that they've had quarterbacks, they've gone back and forth. They really don't have an identity. They haven't had a quarterback identity for, 20 years? 30 years? It always seems like they have the quarterback that's their weak link, going back to Rex Grossman.
I was going to say, they had Rex Grossman.
I know how you love those Florida quarterbacks.
It's amazing how poorly they pan out once they hit the NFL.
Oh, I got some numbers on that later for you. The other team that I had first, but I'm going to go into some things that annoyed me. But one of them was just the overall, it's not really the production by ESPN, but a lot of those NFL guys, they are clueless about college football. And I get it. I don't know half the people that were drafted. It's almost impossible unless that was your full-time job. But they have guys where their full-time job is watching college football. They have some of them on some of the channels, but it seems like ESPN's trying to just like stretch everything out. And I think I texted you over the weekend, like, I like the NFL draft because it takes up so much time and you can casually like listen to it. It's not something that you actively have to watch. So I like to do yard work and stuff on NFL draft weekend because you can just listen to the draft and it gives you something else to kind of just pay attention to so you can mindlessly do garbage work in your yard. And so when I'm trying to do that, like I think it was Friday night, I was doing some stuff and they had like Mike Golick from Mike and Mike. He came out and I thought I'm just listening to it. So it sounded like he was completely drunk. Maybe that's just how he is these days. I don't know. But he came out and he started to cheer for the Eagles in their pick of Devontae Davis in the first round instead of Devonta Smith. And I was kind of like, all right, you're coming out here. You're on the mic. So like it couldn't have just been me that heard it. Like it wasn't just like they were interviewing him. I think he was announcing the pick. And you messed up the name of a guy that won the Heisman. Like you're not messing up a 4th round pick from like some small school. And it's a team that you came out and you're like, yeah, the Eagles are my team. Let me just completely get their draft pick wrong from like some guy from years ago. It's just embarrassing that that's the kind of guy that they're putting out there. And like their introduction to him was like, oh, he's in 2 Hall of Fames, which I didn't even look up to see what Hall of Fames he's in. But I'm like, this is what you're putting out there? Very embarrassing. And I felt bad. And so I looked it up just to make sure that I wasn't mishearing it. But he had announced before that he might go off script before making his announcement. I think that's what it was. I mean, I could be wrong, but like that's what he came in and I mean, he played what? Played at Notre Dame. Played in the NFL. I don't think he's in the Hall of Fame. So it's weird that they brought that up. He was inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, Matt.
Well, there you go.
Maybe there's 2 Wrestling Hall of Fames. I thought, to be honest, just listening that it was going to be ESPN's own like announcer Hall of Fame. But it's like that's the type of thing that they would do. Like, hey, we gave him our own award, but I mean, it's something that like a lot of people wrote about it, so it wasn't only me that heard it, and I don't think he ever said anything. But come on, that's the guy that you have repping your thing. But the other one and just because I know the players, like Mel Kiper, when they drafted Kwity Paye from Michigan in the first round, he went to the Colts, and they were talking about how he's very raw and how he just needs some coaching because he hasn't gotten it at college. I mean, the dude was a 3-star recruit. He was like ranked like 2 in the thousands. Like he wasn't even close to being a top recruit. So I would think that he's been coached up fairly decent. Like to go from like almost a 3-star is never really taken in the first round. So to get that type of coaching and then say like, oh, we don't really know much about this guy. It's like, no, we do. Like Michigan put 8 people in the NFL? Like they've been doing it. They have the 4th most draft picks over the past 5 years. But you would think that Mel Kiper would know that like, oh, maybe their coaching might not be their problem like overall. But and there was one other one. It was another Michigan guy, and the other team that I wanted to hit on were the 49ers. So go ahead. What do you think of their Trey Lance before I get into their later picks?
Well, I like the Trey Lance pick. I think he's young. I think he needs time to develop. And I think if they don't, he's one of those picks that I think if you're looking to either move Garoppolo later in the year or you're using Lance as an insurance policy for when Garoppolo gets injured and then you can start him several weeks down the road, I think it's a great pick. I think if you're picking him right now to say he's going to be my starter immediately, I think that's a mistake, being that he's only had a handful of college games. He's still really, really young, and I don't know that he's quite ready to be plug and play day one starter.
Oh, he's not. The one quarterback that I keep going back and thinking of is Carson Wentz. Because I think he came from a lower division too. And when he came to the Eagles, they kept talking about how he had all these skills. He's like a physical specimen. He could be the best physical tooled quarterback in that draft. And even now, it's like his decision making is just so slow that maybe those extra years, maybe it will finally click for him. But like at this point, how many coaches the Eagles are going to go through and try to force it on him? I mean, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl with that team. Carson Wentz hasn't really done anything with them. And so like Trey Lance, I think, is going to be in the same position where, like you're saying, he doesn't have a lot of starts. He might have the physical tools, but if you throw him out there like the Eagles kept throwing Carson Wentz out there, you're going to break him. Like you are going to break him. That's the point where Sam Darnold has been. And that was the question mark I had for him. Like, look at his decision making. He's in a big bowl game throwing right to their team. Like, he's not ready to be however high he was drafted, like one of the top 5 draft picks. And so Trey Lance kind of like the same situation here. You're drafting on potential. You've been shopping Garoppolo around. Now you need Garoppolo to come back to your team and want to help him develop. Kind of like like an Aaron Rodgers like type of thing where he's behind their quarterback. Unfortunately, like Garoppolo, they've been trying to push him out the door. The Packers weren't really trying to push Favre out the door. They were just trying to get him to retire eventually because they were like, "Are you getting too old, man?" And then he proved them wrong anyway by taking the Vikings very far a couple years later. So, I don't know. I think that that's going to be one of the ones where the 49ers, they seem like they're a mess. So, are they going? Is it going to work out? I think like if it was a franchise that's a little bit more consistent, like if it was like Belichick putting this in place, I'd feel more confident. But I saw that their draft was put pretty low because of some of these reaches. And like, I mean, they had that one. They also reached for Trey Sermon, the Ohio State running back, which I thought he played well down the stretch. A lot of people didn't realize that he transferred from Oklahoma. So it took him a while to get up to speed in their system. And then everyone said that they reached for Ambry Thomas, the quarterback from Michigan. But Thomas got 100% screwed last year because the coronavirus ruined his entire season. And I don't know, I mean, we talked about Justin Fields' seizures and stuff. So there are other players that have medical things. But I want to say like 2 or 3 years ago, he had colitis real bad. And he lost a ton of weight. So he didn't play a season. He came in the next year. He battled back from it. I think it was 2019, and he had a hell of a season. They were even talking about him being a second-round pick. Instead of going to the draft last year, he decided to return to Michigan. Whenever the Big Ten canceled their season, he opted out because he was high risk because of the colitis thing. So the Big Ten canceled their season. He signed with an agent because he thought that they were done. The Big Ten decides, oh, never mind. We're going to come back and backtrack. So then it was rumored that he's going to try to come back, but he had already signed with an agent, so he was kind of stuck. And then, boom. So then they come out and they're like, in the NFL draft, they're like, oh, he's a 6th-round pick. He didn't really play last year, and we don't really have the film on him. I'm like, you don't take a 2nd-round pick, something completely out of his control, because it's not like he was sick last year or injured. He came out and he had a hell of a pro, or it was senior day. He was in like one of the Senior Bowls and he balled out. So I think that's where the 49ers, they drafted him. And if I'm looking at that, I don't see that as okay, that's a reach this year. I look at it as last year where he's a potential 2nd-round pick. You get him in a 3rd. I think that's a pretty good deal for them. Now, is it going to pan out? I don't know. You never know. But it's a mid-round pick. So I don't see that really knocking them as much. I think their draft was really intriguing for me because they took a couple guys that had question marks like Trey Sermon, Ambry Thomas, Trey Lance, that I think have very high upside. So now it's like, all right, what are you going to do with those guys? Because I could see him being an all-pro. I could see Trey Sermon being their best running back since who knows when. but it might not work out. Carlos Hyde didn't really work out for them, and they had a couple other picks that didn't really work out either. How many Ohio State running backs did they have? Was it Hyde? Wasn't there one up before them?
Ezekiel Elliott.
He's with the Cowboys, dude. I thought the 49ers drafted another Ohio State running back. I could be wrong. Any other teams that stood out to you? I think I have a couple more, but I'll give you a chance to get in there.
Well, what did you think of the Raiders' Leatherwood pick?
Speaking of reaches, right? Because I was talking about maybe the Steelers will get him in the third round. And then, boom, first round pick. And I'm looking, let me look and see, because I have the analysis or whatever up to see where they think that their draft was. But overall, one of the things that they were kind of touting was how strong their line was. And then they go ahead and take a reach like that. I think consistently their draft was ranked pretty low. So it's almost like another thing where Gruden's like, what's the direction of your team again? They drafted 3 safeties, which I hate when the Steelers draft safeties sometimes, because I feel like you can always get a cornerback, because there are a lot of big cornerbacks in college that you can get and just convert to safety. Or like if it's a strong side safety, you might be able to get a couple free safeties or whatever, maybe convert him to a strong safety, or like a Jabril Peppers, he played like linebacker / whatever. Convert him to a safety. He does very well with the Giants now. So it's like, all right, why are you drafting 3 safeties though? Because they're not as versatile. Like they're playing safety in college because maybe they don't have the cover skills. Maybe they're not big enough to be a linebacker. But all right, you might be able to get one of them, but to get 3? Like, what are you doing? What did you think of that?
Well, I think 2 parts. Number one, I think with Gus Bradley's defense and coming from that Pete Carroll background, they rely heavily on their safeties, like when they had the Legion of Boom and different things like that. So finding the right guys to fill those spots is definitely a requirement. So if I thought when they picked up the TCU safety in the second, that if he's able to contribute right away, that can be a good fit for them. My initial reaction when they drafted Leatherwood was, that's an extreme reach, and I very selfishly and very guiltily, I felt like Mel Kiper. I was like, that's terrible value for what's still available. There were still a lot of quality guys that I thought maybe would have been better picks, but then when I heard Mike Mayock's decision for it, it made a little bit more sense to me, and like they were looking at it like, he's stepping in as day one starting right tackle. And if they're having him at tackle with still having Incognito and I'm drawing a blank on the other guy right now, but they do have most of the pieces intact to have that run game. And I think like where most of the NFL right now is very pass first, I think Gruden's still in that mindset of trying to be a run-first guy and using Jacobs and pounding the ball and kind of being that downhill running team that not many people are playing. So I think it gives them, if they have that physical offensive line, it gives them an advantage come crunch time that they can rely on their running game. And almost similar to what the Titans are doing and be run-centered, but then at the same time, set up the play action pass. So it's a little bit of a different style, but I think it can work for them if they get those draft picks to fall into place.
Yeah, I think just most people had him as a second round pick. You have the injuries and stuff. And so now there were like some sources that came out and said that he would never have fallen to the second round. The Ravens or some other team would have got him. Like, how do you know that that's not bullshit? And if you think that you can get him and you're the Raiders in that spot, why wouldn't you then trade down to the 20s? Like, I just feel like you said, with the value, saying that that's going to be your starter, awesome. But I still like taking guys that are like a high potential guy. Like, why not? Why not take a reach then, or try to like double down and just trade back and then get another pick for it? Like, just taking him at 17, I thought that's still for that to work out, he would have to be what a 6-time Pro Bowler, 6 to 8 time. Like for me, just that type of reach, knowing that you could have got him later, just because you're afraid of another team taking him. I don't know. That's just what I thought when I heard it. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. That's a guy I thought the Steelers would have a shot at later. Like they just probably could have. And I know that Northwestern, like their tackle Slater, got taken by the Chargers a little bit earlier, so maybe they thought that they could get it. But like the Virginia Tech tackle was still available. So even if you trade down, there were no other tackles taken. Like you're going to get one of the other ones, but you took one that was rated lower. Why? I don't know. The other one was, I don't forget to bring it up because I know I talked about him on the show for the Titans. They drafted Rashad Weaver. Remember the Pitt defensive guy?
Yes.
And at one point, he was like committed to Michigan. So I knew that he is probably a pretty high like talent guy. They got him in the mid-range. I had talked about the Steelers potentially picking him, keeping him close to Pittsburgh. He goes out and punches a woman. And allegedly, his statement to the officers said, he stated to the other officers on scene that he had no problem hitting a female if they needed it. So, like, what type of NFL guy goes out, makes that comment, and then, like, I don't think they ended up releasing him yet, but I'm guessing that the Steelers are probably relieved if they had him on his draft board that they didn't get him. Because so far it's been a PR nightmare. I've seen his name come up a ton over the past week, and it's almost like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, do anything else instead of making it worse on yourself. But yeah, definitely. Why are you even out? If you're going to be an NFL draft pick, like, just hang out by yourself. Like, why even put yourself in any scenario where you can make a poor decision? So that was one I thought that the Steelers, I was hoping that they might have had a shot at him, but I'm glad that they didn't, because of what a nightmare that would have been. Are there any other teams that stood out for you?
No.
The one. So immediately after the draft, I get people telling me about how great the Patriots draft is. I'm like, why? Why are you telling me this? It's like they must know that I'm a big Tom Brady fan. They're so invested, Matt, in Bill Belichick, and they don't like that I'm talking a bunch of trash on him. So they're like, look how Belichick did. He got Mac Jones, high value, first round pick. Then they trade around. They get they get Barmore from Alabama in the second. They get a couple guys from Oklahoma. They get your boy Cameron McGrone from Michigan, linebacker. Because I had talked about the Steelers potentially getting him. They got him in the 5th round. If the Steelers would have got him in the 5th round, awesome. Like, I didn't think as high as some of the mock drafts had him, that I thought it would have been a reach for the Steelers, but that's probably a good pick for them. But other than that, you're basically just hoping that their quarterback pick, Mac Jones, pans out. Because otherwise, his draft is just a typical draft for him. Trade back, get a bunch of positions, defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, safety, tackle, that you can just like fill in and try to get high value guys. He got Trey Nixon from UCF, which is one of the guys I believe we mentioned at wide receiver. They got him all the way in the 7th round. That could be a value pick for them. But there wasn't really a draft where I thought, oh man, Patriots, they're going to definitely turn it around next year. What do you think?
Well, I kind of thought with the drafting of Mac Jones, and for as much hype as it drew around him, that I was like, maybe there is something to this, where they have the veteran quarterback and he sits behind them. They both have like similar comparisons on their like pre-draft photos of having dad bods. Like maybe he's mini Tom Brady.
No. I'll just tell you, Tom Brady is a different breed, Matt. Like, you can just watch it. Like, compare what him and Aaron Rodgers did, like, in that championship game. Remember, Aaron Rodgers wouldn't even run the ball. How many times does Tom Brady just do a quarterback sneak, even in, like, his side of the field, just because he's probably thinks, I'm going to be the only one that can't mess this up. I might as well just do it myself. And then, like, he's not shaking hands after the game. He's not even doing press stuff until after they win the Super Bowl. And then even then, he's still talking about winning the next one. Like, I haven't seen that from Mac Jones. Like, I've seen a lot of, I mean, I don't want to say he's a game manager because I would think that he's probably been the best quarterback out of Alabama recently. Maybe Jalen Hurts and Tua, I guess you could argue, are a little bit more dynamic. But just in terms of consistency, we haven't seen that level from Tua. And I know he had the injury, which probably knocked him down a bit. Hurts has been fairly good for the Eagles, I thought. But like if you're looking at their production in the NFL, there's nothing that I see in Mac Jones that I'm gonna say like, oh, compared to those other two guys, he's much better. Like, no. He wasn't really. He had, did you see how many people they had drafted? Alabama is so talented. He even had a Heisman wide receiver on his team. Like his stats should have just been through the roof. And one of the things I think we talked about were like a lot of like low yardage throws. And I know he had some deep throws and they had some issues with that, but then he kind of connected on his pro day after a few misses or whatever. So it's like, all right, show me what you can do when the talent is the same. And that's the one thing, like Trey Lance, awesome. Didn't have a high competition. He outplayed it. Now he can show that he can play with higher level of talent. Mac Jones is coming from the opposite scenario where he had everyone better. His position, like his team was full. No matter who they played, their team would probably just walk on the other team and be the entire starters. Like there's not like any mismatches that like the other team would have that would put just extra pressure on them just because of how Alabama's been recruiting. So if I want to see a quarterback, I want to see him have like a Joe Burrow type year where he's clearly the best player in college football. But I haven't seen that from him. Like I think that's where like Trevor Lawrence like looked like when he went out, Thompson wasn't the same team. So yeah, it makes sense he's the first round pick. If Mac Jones went out, would Alabama even have missed a beat?
No.
No.
But I will say, like with the wide receiver draft, I thought it was interesting how many guys matched up. Like they had Burrow and Jamar, the wide receiver from LSU. They had with Tua and Waddle and with the Eagles pick. Like they all were matched up with like their previous quarterbacks. So I'm curious to see how that plays out.
I liked when the Steelers did it when they tried to get Rudolph. I thought that was a good gamble. And I know we'll get into the Steelers here in a second, but I don't know because it really depends on what's going to happen. I was surprised just because of like if you look at the last two wide receivers that had won the Heisman, I think it was Desmond Howard and Tim Brown. I think we talked about on the show. Like they had pretty damn good NFL careers, just because for a wide receiver to get that type of hype, like you have to be doing something right. You have to be getting the separation that's putting you out there. Like, so for a wide receiver, even on his own team, and to be taken above him, and then he was taken third behind the guys you mentioned, Chase and Waddle. It's like, all right, why? Like, why? I could see the Eagles getting the better end of that deal. Just because if Waddle was so much better, why didn't he have the numbers? Like, so he had Smith on his team to, like, draw double coverages. He was getting so much hype in the middle of the year that you would think that the other stats would have came to other guys. But you're just basing it off of what? Physical type stuff? At some point, like, and I know a lot of Heisman players end up being busts, but at that position, it hasn't happened. It's very rare. It's kind of like when Charles Woodson won it, and then he ended up being like in the NFL Hall of Fame or whatever. It's like, all right, so if a cornerback would win the Heisman, you would think that he has had so much hype that he's going to be a pretty good cornerback, I would think. So same with Smith here. When the Eagles got him, I was like, oh, damn, of course the Eagles are going to get him. And then they went ahead and then they got, what was it, Dickerson? Hold on. Where's the thing so I don't mess up? Yeah, they got Dickerson, the center from Alabama. They got him early in the second, which I thought could have been a reach, but that kind of pissed me off because I was hoping the Steelers would get him.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was kind of like, all right, the rest of their draft was okay. But just getting two guys that I thought were going to be head and shoulders above everyone else at their position, and the Eagles getting them just kind of annoyed me because I don't want the Eagles to be good. I think people listen to the show know that. Is there anyone else you had?
Cleveland, I've seen a lot of the post-draft analysis that said that Cleveland had a really good draft.
I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm looking at it right now because I already had it up. But a couple of theirs, I think they just took kind of the safe picks, and I don't think that that's a bad thing for them because I really don't think they were that far away. But like a lot of them, they just kind of kept close to like their region, like guy from Cincinnati, Ohio State, West Virginia, guy from Notre Dame. They just kind of took the safe picks that were like kind of more regional picks. And I don't think the Browns had really done that in the past. I think a lot of times they go for like the hype guy or like they reach for another quarterback. But the one pick that's going to be interesting, I think, for them is James Hudson, the Cincinnati tackle. I feel like every guy I talk about went to Michigan at some point, but he was at Michigan, but he was a defensive tackle, like Don Brown brought him in. And then he didn't get along with Don Brown. So then there were some rumors that he was going to switch to the offensive line back and forth, but he didn't want to play offensive line. So he transfers. Cincinnati puts him on the offensive line. So it was like, oh, what the hell? And so, yeah, it's like, yeah, you are not going to play defensive line. You're going to play offensive tackle anyway. So I know he's a big guy. So I'm hoping that he has good success in the NFL. But that's one of the ones where I wonder if just because of the position switch, if they're going to be able to get a high value guy just because, like, all right, the tape on this guy, and then he moved from whatever the Bowl subdivision down to the Cincinnati level is like a little step down in competition, helped him get up. They look at his measurables and then they say, all right, they'll get him in the fourth round. Let's see what happens. So that could end up being a good one for them just because of the high like recruiting rankings as he was coming in, but just a position switch. So how often is that going to pay for? I did want to mention your boy Pitts from Florida with the Falcons. What do you think of that? Because I know you secretly like the Falcons.
I was kind of taken away. Like, I understand the rationale. Like, if you're a best player available, and well, athlete for athlete, he is an offensive freak. However, when the last couple of years you've been losing games like 56 to 55, like the offense is the problem. You got to find someone on defense, and they're just like, you know what? We're just going to draft all offensive players. We're just going to, it's like a car crash. Like, we're just not going to look over here. We're just going to keep focusing on the offense. How many more weapons can we acquire? They're drafting offensive linemen and Pitts.
Hey, they got like, Mayfield from Michigan. That's a good tackle. He shut down Chase Young, Matt.
Well, can he make a tackle? Can he switch? Can he two platoon? Because if he can't play defense, then he's not worth time right now.
What are you talking about? They got 3 defensive guys in the 5th round. They're taking those high value picks back there, Matt. Defensive tackle, defensive end, and cornerback.
There you go.
And they traded up. I think they traded up for Richie Grant, the safety from UCF, which I thought was a little bit of a reach. And then, because what they have him, he was overall 53rd. They got him with what, the 40th pick? So they did something for you. I don't know if it's a good thing.
But I think with I'm wondering if there isn't something in the works to try to move Julio Jones come June. Because there was a lot of speculation as to what they were planning on doing with him. Um, and actually, our trainer's a Falcons guy. And so, as I was saying about it, I was like, anywhere but Baltimore is if they're going to move him. I just don't want him in the division because that's all Lamar needs is another weapon to throw to.
Well, the Ravens did with Rashad Bateman, and I think he was the best. I think if you look at the draft, he probably was the best receiver in the Big Ten. Rondell Moore would be one of the other ones, and he ended up going to Arizona, which I thought was kind of weird. Like you're talking about the Falcons getting so many wide receivers. Why is Cliff Kingsbury just getting more slot guys? Like what the hell? Like
That makes sense.
is that going to be his entire team? Like he's like, you know what? We need to get in the second round another wide receiver. Like we just need to fill him out, baby. But the Ravens got him. They got Bateman, and then another cornerback that just fell because of like this stuff with the coronavirus. Sean Wade from Ohio State. He did the same thing Ambry Thomas did. I don't think he actually signed with an agent, but he declared for the NFL draft after the season was canceled. Then they held a petition, like him and his dad came out and they held a petition like type thing in Indianapolis outside the Big Ten headquarters. They announced that the season was back, and then he never rejoined the team until like later in the year. So it's like, what are you doing? Like, why would you go through all the trouble of starting the protest or whatever, and then just coming out and doing whatever? Like, it just didn't make sense. So he could end up being, he was one, I think he was higher than Ambry Thomas in last year's draft. I think he was slated as a first round pick. So they got him in the 5th round. That could end up being a very good value pick for the Ravens in terms of that. And surprisingly, Matt, they drafted the fullback, Ben Mason from Michigan. Do you think they're going to put in some power sets with Lamar, get him a little bit more protected?
I think they might. I mean, I could also see them kind of shifting and using their tight end in like an H-back type thing. That seems to be more of the move in the NFL is to have guys that are tight end, fullback, mold.
Well, that's what's going to happen now. They're going to have a tight end in one. They're going to have a fullback, and they're going to go like wishbone.
Well, that makes sense because they've been doing a lot of like power read and different stuff. So that would be an interesting move to just have that guy as the kick out guy and let Lamar just be in that halfback role. I mean, it's a nightmare to try to defend. So totally makes sense.
Yeah, when Harbaugh gets, when he gets scared under the big game pressure and he tightens up, just like his brother, what happens? He put the fullback in. They'll go right to just power reads the whole time.
I need another fullback. Another fullback. We're going to 5 fullbacks.
You can't win games unless you have a fullback on the field, Matt. I'm sure some coach said that somewhere. But yeah, let's go into the Steelers draft now. We'll circle back around. We'll probably spend a few weeks on draft type stuff as more stuff comes out. But I was so happy that they didn't draft a quarterback. Everyone's like texting me like, oh, they didn't get a quarterback. I'm like, why the hell would they draft a quarterback? If they would have drafted a quarterback in the 1st round, I probably would have just smashed my head off the wall, man. Because I think that was the second amount of quarterbacks taken in the 1st round, like all time. I can't remember. Maybe it was like the Marino year, something like in the 80s had 6 quarterbacks taken. I saw a couple years that had 4. They had 5 with Mac Jones, the top 3, Lawrence, Trey Lance, and Zach Wilson, plus Justin Fields. We already talked about him. 5, you're going to get the 6th best quarterback with your 1st round pick? No, that's dumb. They got Najee Harris, the guy we wanted, and immediately the Jaguars got ETN, which I thought was an interesting move. You talk about wide receivers playing with their quarterbacks. Why not get the safety valve, Matt?
Yep.
That's your boy Urban Meyer. He's thinking again.
Well, I like his rationale for it because when you're drafting in the 1st round, you always draft your 3rd down running back in the 1st round. You're going to very rarely use. Like that was what he's like. He'll be our third down back. We already have two guys that we're confident in, but he can come in on third down. Big cannon fodder. Like, then why did you waste that pick in the first?
And they're getting their H back, Matt. My man, Tim Tebow. He's done with the Mets. He retired from baseball, but he's been working out with the Jaguars. I don't know if they ended up signing him or not. But boom.
They're waiting to see how bad the public outcry is going to be.
No, you're wrong. Like, that's his redemption arc. Urban Meyer had some questionable things delivered to the Ohio State athletic department by one of his assistants. So he needs Jesus back in his life to help clean that up, Matt. So to enter Tim Tebow. And then you're gonna be surprised when they do a tight end around pop pass where Tim Tebow's throwing a touchdown pass. You'll be shocked. You heard it here first when they're winning the Super Bowl on a play like that. And then he leads a prayer on NBC or whatever the primetime channel was that year. The commentators would just be so mad that Tim Tebow's even out there.
He's out there praying.
But I think the Steelers got the better of the two running backs. Maybe I'm wrong. I just like Harris all around, and I think that's going to be one of the main things. The second pick, Freiermuth, which is the other thing that I hinted at that annoyed me during the draft. Every tight end that they talked about in the draft, the announcer called Baby Gronk. There was like 3 or 4 different tight ends that they talked about, and he was one of them. And I just thought, like, okay, when was he so great? Like what did he do at Penn State? Like, and they said, like, oh, he was injured the one year. He had more passes than like Gesicki. But to be honest, like, I never really thought that he stood out. But what did you think of that pick?
Well, I kind of looked at it from the perspective of he's a blocking tight end. When Penn State when they were trying to get the tight end involved in the blocking schemes, he became that fullback, H-back type guy in their scheme. So if that's what they're using him for, because when you look at the tight ends that they currently had on roster, none of them were really posing a threat in the run game. So I think if you get the mileage out of him, he has the potential. Maybe not a baby Gronk, but maybe he can be a baby Heath Miller. And if we can get that kind of production out of him where he can help in the run game and be productive in the passing game, then I think that definitely hits the mark. Because I think his wide receiver play was definitely a strength, and he's willing to engage in the run game, which is even better because we need more people blocking for Najee.
And so, just looking back through him, he had a shoulder injury that required surgery. He said he is fully healed, but he only played 4 games last year because of it, and then he was out. He was first team All Big Ten, and he did win the Big Ten Tight End of the Year award, I think, the year before, the junior year. That might have been the year he broke Gesicki's like touchdown record or something. But he did have a lot of receptions and things. So if they're going to use him as a safety valve, awesome. If he can catch, great. Just a tight end with a shoulder injury, that kind of scares me. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Whenever you take a guy like that in the second round, I don't know where. Let me see, because I actually still have it up. But like just wondering if they could have got him later. But I ended up did liking the center that they did get. He was right around where he was rated, so they didn't really reach for him. They didn't get a high value pick either. Someone else that fell. They kind of just picked the next guy that was in that slot. But I did like the center out of Illinois. He played multiple positions for them, Kendrick Green. And so it was one that a lot of people thought was a reach because he was picked for like the 4th round. They got him in the 3rd round. But I think a lot of it is going to be he was kind of like their float position between center and guard. He didn't have a lot of center experience. So if they're thinking that he's going to take over center, it might end up being an awesome pick. just because there weren't a lot of centers in the draft. So to get one, announce him as a center. He played mostly guard. Perfect. Let's see how it goes. So it's one that could have high reward, might be a little bit of a risk, but I'm actually excited about it because just with his flexibility and his size, he's 6'4", 315 pounds. They talked about him being short. I was like, short? He's 6'4". Like, you don't need every lineman on your team to be 6'8". Like, what are you talking about? Like, you need them to just be bigger and athletic, especially if he's going to be center. So I like that pick. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I kind of thought if you're the more flexibility you have across the front, the better you are. So if you can play center and guard, then that's just an added bonus, because then when injuries happen, to be able to move guys around, and I think that transition is a little bit easier from guard to center. But value.
And the next pick, Dan Moore, the tackle out of Texas A&M. I had said before, I don't care who you get a tackle or a lineman that has high upside, good size. He's 6'6", 312 pounds or 311 pounds. He's the 12th best tackle in the class, but who cares? That's ESPN ranking him. They really don't know what the hell they're talking about. So let's go ahead and get some depth at that position and see if some of these guys can develop. So I like that. And they also followed it up with another A&M guy, Buddy Johnson. And I do like getting teammates. Hopefully they're friends, because I think that helps motivate people and get them comfortable in the NFL and kind of give them a little bit of just extra support. And then, of course, he's going to be helping out in that linebacking core with Devin Bush coming back from injury. So what do you think of those picks?
Well, I thought they were good, because Jimbo Fisher is a pretty good recruiter and definitely has produced some high caliber players in the league. So hopefully they can contribute for the Steelers.
The 5th round pick, another guy out of Wisconsin, Laudermilk, the defensive end. They traded up for him, and I think it's a good pick. Like, I thought he was a fairly decent defensive end at Wisconsin. He's very big, like tall. He's 6'8". So just having another guy that can get out there with like a little bit of extra size, possibly to throw on the other side of TJ Watt, I think is a good pick, because just you lost Bud Dupree. There's also rumors, or at least speculation now, that next year the Steelers are going to get an extra compensation pick because of losing Bud Dupree in the free agent market. So that's going to be something else that they could help off next year, kind of backfill that position. But it's something that we'll have to come back and see. Then they got Quincy Roche, outside linebacker of Miami, and another guy, like I said, has some good upside. Let's see what happens. They need more pass rushers. Let's go get Laudermilk and Roush, and let's put them up and see what happens. One of the other guys I think I talked about, Trey Norwood at Oklahoma, a very, very high value pick in the 7th round. Like, why not? He was like the Big Ten co-leader in interceptions. And with Steven Nelson being gone, that's the type of guy I think you can fill in and kind of see what happens if he's going to make that jump. What do you think about filling out some of the defensive positions like that?
Well, I think it was good that that was definitely a need that they had to go after. It's just, I think if you're looking at the players that if their window for winning the Super Bowl is right now, I'm not sure how much they're going to contribute immediately.
And I don't think the Steelers are ready to win the Super Bowl right now. I know that's going to annoy some people, but you're basically hoping that Ben stays healthy the entire year, and then would outduel like who else? Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. Like, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Too many mistakes. Like, he would almost have to have the perfect postseason and then potentially meet up with Tom Brady again, who seemingly never messes up in the biggest game. So, all
But
right.
I will say, like, I felt like those back end picks, they weren't as pressing. Like when you look at like I know going into the draft we're like, oh, linebacker is definitely a need to try to replace Bud Dupree and whatever. But they did re-sign Vince Williams, so they do have Bush and Williams in the middle. They have Watt, and to be able to maybe have one of these draft picks pan out on the other side, kind of gives a little bit of optimism that they have some wiggle room with those guys that maybe they rotate people in and out and do some different things to try to make that work.
And that's going to be something where I just like having the extra depth, because we saw last year with the injuries, that was pretty much the end of the year. When the defense started to get injured, that was it. The defense is what had them undefeated. It wasn't Ben. Once the defense went out and Ben had to win the games, he couldn't do it. So, I mean, people are talking about like, oh, he puts up all these numbers or whatever. And all right, well, did you get him any help? Like, no. So that's where I think next year you're looking at it where if Juju doesn't play out of his mind this year, you're going to be getting some wide receivers next year, potentially then getting a new quarterback. That's why I was so excited that they didn't take one. And before I continue, I remember we talked about punters, and I said Georgia Tech had one. He's a pretty big guy. I think Presley Harvin, that's exactly who the Steelers drafted. So funny, dude. He led the ACC in punting, 49 yards a kick. So he was a first team All-American. And why not? Why not get a guy in the 7th round? You never know. At least you're not fighting with him in like the free agent picks or whatever. So I like their draft. I honestly thought that they were going to. The only position, like I said, could be a little bit of a stretch. I really don't think they needed a tight end in the 2nd round. But Ebron dropped so many passes last year that maybe they did need a guy. Maybe they needed that last safety valve. And maybe that's why Ben decided, like, you know what? How many passes can he drop? I have to just force it to someone else right now, and he throws an interception. I don't know. So we'll see. I'm just so glad that they didn't waste a high pick on another quarterback. They've been doing it the past couple years, and we're always kind of like, yeah, that could be good. That could work out. And it's not worked out so far. And with Aaron Rodgers being potentially, he doesn't want to be in Green Bay at all. Green Bay said, like, oh, we're going to do whatever it takes to keep him. I don't think did they even get him any help. So it's kind of like, hey, Aaron Rodgers, we really like you, but come on, like you got to do it on your own. I guess they did draft Amari Rodgers from Clemson in the 3rd round. That's the only help that he got. I guess they drafted him a new center, Josh Myers from Ohio State, but they went cornerback, defensive tackle, cornerback, inside linebacker, and had a running back in the 7th round, mixed in with some linemen. So it's like, all right.
But he just throws to Devontae Adams every time, so what difference does it make?
Yeah.
How many more people do you need when you only have Devontae Adams?
Strategically, I'm going to pick up Juju for $1, and then when the Steelers draft Aaron Rodgers, his value will go through the roof. I'll have him as my keeper because Aaron Rodgers will just throw to him the entire time like Devontae Adams. Because
the right move is tank for Malik Willis, and then you have the counter to Lamar.
Which I did see that he's back like this year at Liberty, right?
Yes.
I know. I did see him on potential one of the late round picks, but I'm like, why is he a late round pick? If every other quarterback in next year's draft, like their write-ups weren't that good, and then like they're like, there's this guy, he could be taken in the late rounds. I'm like, his write-up was the best. He had like the best stats and everything. Why wouldn't he be in the 1st round? Didn't make any sense other than he played at Liberty. That was their point, Matt. But yes. I don't know. Like for Ben, there are so many quarterbacks that are on the move right now with like Tom Brady, and we've already seen it. Peyton Manning, late in his career, moves teams, wins the Super Bowl. Tom Brady moves team, wins the Super Bowl. So if Aaron Rodgers is going to move teams, like that's one where the Steelers, I think, would have to be interested. Because, like, even Phillip Rivers moved teams, had a much better year. If he would have moved a year or two earlier, who knows what would have happened? Maybe he would have had the Colts in the Super Bowl. Because, like, Andrew Luck kept getting hurt. They kept blaming it on the Colts. Guess who didn't get hurt? Phillip Rivers. Maybe it was just Andrew Luck. Hold on to the ball too long. I mean, at some point, if you keep getting injured, you can blame the line however many years. But that's one of the ones where, like, get Trevor Lawrence, get him like the third round back or whatever. Urban Meyer was goofing around about probably. Who knows what the hell he's talking about. But get him guys that he's comfortable with so that he's not holding the ball back there and just looking like a deer in headlights. Some of it's on the coaching scheme, obviously. But, like, I still think that with these quarterbacks starting to move around and be successful, you'd have to be idiotic to look at your situation and say, like, if Ben says, you know what, I'm done. We have all this cap room. And then the Packers are like, oh, yeah, we have to let Aaron Rodgers go. And you're the Steelers. Why not? Why not take a gamble? Where else would he want to go? Like, you would be a legend immediately. People are already questioning his legacy, including me. I'm not even a fan of the guy. But you'd have to be crazy to not want him on the Steelers. So, and he's not even the only quarterback that's on the move. Carolina just did it with Sam Darnold. They were like, look, the Jets are almost breaking this guy. We better take him now and build around him. And then everyone was kind of like, well, what the hell was Carolina doing in that draft? You know, Matt? Because everyone down here, they were like, Carolina didn't draft the quarterback. What the hell were they doing? I'm like, they just invested in Sam Darnold. Why the hell would they draft the quarterback? I think a lot of teams and fans are they're so set on, we need a new quarterback because that's what gets ratings for the draft, that they think that their team needs one.
Yeah.
But that's my end here for this. Do you have anything else you wanted to hit on?
One last thing that I wanted to hit on, and I was thinking about this. There's a lot of people that I know leading up to the draft said Pittsburgh needs an offensive line. And even after drafting Najee Harris, the attitude and the mindset was, oh, well, they didn't upgrade the offensive line, so good luck running the ball. And to those people, I say, Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders didn't need an offensive line. He just ran around all over the place. Didn't matter. If you have a good running back, he can compensate.
Matt, when the Steelers had Le'Veon Bell, did they have any line issues?
Yes, exactly. And that was the next point that I was going to go to. Le'Veon Bell got drafted. He would just stand back there for 20 minutes, and then he would run right through the line for 5 yards. And then as soon as they went to the current group of stable of running backs, they try to do the same thing, and they get tackled for a 1-yard loss every time. So I think just by picking him up, I think he immediately adds some depth. He adds value to the offense, and that instead of Ben throwing from a 3rd and 9 where everyone knows that they're throwing the ball, if you're throwing in 3rd and 3, and now it's not as predictable, they can't just pin their ears back and get after him, I think it makes Ben better. And I think you're going to see a more efficient offense. I think you're going to see a better offense overall because they're going to have that running potential and the balance that they haven't had. If you can't run the ball, you're not going to win.
So what you're saying is they should have drafted a fullback like the Ravens.
They should have signed Leonard Fournette last year.
Hey, I said the same thing. And look, he won a Super Bowl. They had to threaten to bench him now. But I don't know. So just looking at the final draft wrap up, a lot of people rated the Steelers draft low. I think for the same reason. They think like, oh, they need to draft a quarterback or they need to just draft a bunch of linemen. But I think they hit all their needs. They have a line. Ben needs to quit holding on to the goddamn ball. And then I think you'll see the running game open up. Like his play action fakes aren't even play action fakes, man. If you watch him, he's not even like trying. I mean, Tom Brady doesn't try a lot on his play action fakes either, so maybe I'm just wrong. But they know that like that was going to be a joke. So getting rid of Connor, putting Harrison here, let's see what happens. You sent along, someone did a combination. I really can't read it. It's not even the email. It kind of came across pixelated, so I can't show it on the video. You won't be able to read it. But The Steelers, they have them ranked 24th. So they compiled all these newspapers like the NFL.com, NBC Sports, Pro Football Nation, Sporting News, blah, 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 blah. All of their draft grades. And they did it kind of like a GPA. Steelers ended up with a 2.5, if I'm reading this right, which fairly low. 24th out of 32 teams in the league, which ironically is their exact draft position. So, bad draft? I don't think so. I think people are rating down just because of they probably saw the center pick as potentially more of a guard. Oh well, who cares? You can do whatever you want on the line as long as they know the calls. You just need someone Ben's comfortable with. And they really didn't get Ben any help, but the running game and the tight end, if he's more of a safety valve, I think that could work out. And I don't think the receivers were bad. I think the issues were drops, Ben's poor decision-making, and defensive injuries. Guess what? Most of the defense is back. I don't think Bud Dupree's that big of a loss. Let's see. Let's see what happens. So that's their rating. Let's see. Anything else, Matt, for the NFL draft?
No.
The ratings, TV ratings, as I always talk about it, highest. It was the third most draft ever. Crushed mostly everything else on TV. I think it was like sporting events. Because a lot of ESPN stuff, they combined all 3 days. All 3 days, they averaged 6.1 million viewers. That's talking about people just talking that on the 7th round on a Saturday afternoon. Like, that's how high the ratings were. That is ridiculous. That's like 6 times as much as any NBA game gets regular season. People would much rather watch people get drafted in the 7th round than watch an actual sporting event in other sports. So, like, if you add in digital, they said it was up to 9 million people at once, which is probably me, because like I'm listening to it on my phone, so I would assume that would come in. It was on the ESPN app while I'm working outside, so like that I probably counted in that million instead of the whatever million. And I think the first round had 12 million viewers on ABC, which beat mostly everything else, even like some of the NBA finals last year. So crazy. They say that people don't watch like football or whatever. Their draft is getting more than the championship games in other sports. So that's what I had. I did have one other thing here in the NFL that I wanted to talk about, and then just quickly hit on college recruiting and stuff. But Jawan James suffered an injury. I'm going to actually just bring up the tweet so I don't mess this up. The Broncos offensive tackle, Jawan James, his contract last year, it told. So he was playing under his 2020 contract this year. Like, they haven't got a new contract yet, which he has $10 million guaranteed for skill and injuries and another $10 million in 2021. So he tore his Achilles, but he wasn't at their facility. So he's working out away from team facility. Now his $10 million or $20 million salary is in jeopardy because they don't think that Denver says that they're not obligated to pay him with him working out off site. So crazy. And to make it just the timeline to help people understand, 2019, he only played in 3 games. He had a knee injury. Last year, the first $10 million, he opted out because of the coronavirus. So his $10 million would be back paid, I believe, is how it was going to work. But instead, he tore his Achilles. So now his back pay is in jeopardy, and this season's salary is in jeopardy because it happened when he was just off site. If he would have went to the Broncos facility, he would get his entire salary. So they're talking about players not feeling safe at the facility, but sometimes, man, you got to know what's in your contract. But that's just brutal. So I want to talk about it. I don't know if you had anything else you want to add in, Matt.
Yeah, part of it is it's the NFL Players Association. They're trying to to advocate for more time away from the facility. So they're advising players and saying, don't work out at the facility. Stay out, do your own thing, and trying to advise them that way. But in doing so, they're setting players up like Jawan James, where they're going to miss if you get injured being away from your home site. That now you're potentially missing out on your pay.
And that just sucks, man. And it's always tough in a situation like that because you really don't know who to trust. And so,
Well, and I wonder as well. Like, I feel bad for him because that's unfortunate that he was preparing for the season and suffered the injury. But you look at how many players from the early 2000s that from Miami that refused to report to their NFL facility, and they said, "I train at the U," and would go back to Miami. That they never sustained those types of injuries, and even someone like Tom Brady, who is like putting out that he does his own workouts and has his own training stuff. That you would think that if that was something that you were interested in, you would have that like rewritten into your contract to be able to work out at whatever other facility. Because if it was written in that they can cut that money out for working out away from the facility, it's like, come on, you gotta take care of yourself first.
so what you're saying is potentially he wasn't working out at all. He got hurt doing something else.
I'm not going to throw that one out there, but it is potential. The potential of that type of incident happening.
Which I think I saw that I forget the guy's name, but one of the Michigan State guys, he like got drafted and then he was in an accident on the ATV and had a concussion. I think he got signed by an NFL team. Was it Malik McDowell? I'm gonna look that up. And I thought the same thing. I was like, all right, you're gonna get so he sustained injuries from an all ATV accident shortly after being drafted by the Seahawks. He never played a game for them. Then he was arrested for a series of crimes. So he spent 11 months in prison in Michigan in 2019. Just signed with the Browns, Matt. They're giving him a chance, baby. That's what that reminds me of. For some reason, just taking things into your own hands. I want to say that he was one of the ones where, was he arrested and his video went viral because he kept asking for the manager? But maybe that's a different guy. It's hard to keep my Michigan State run-ins with the law straight. But let's see. College recruiting, my last thing here. Draft selections. And I've seen this a lot of places, a couple different things that I have here. collegefootballdata.com, they put out a graphic that shows team recruitings. Again, I couldn't really get it. When they share it on Twitter, I think they just compress them, and it's very hard to get high quality to show on the stream. But they're showing that Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, and Michigan have the highest number of draft picks. And in terms of team recruiting rankings, teams that overachieve, Michigan, Florida, Washington, Utah, and Iowa because of their recruiting rankings. Of course, Alabama has so many high recruiting rankings. They're in the very top right. Like they have the highest recruiting ranking, and they also have the highest number of people drafted. That's why, going back to Mac Jones, you're telling me that his team was so talented, they're off in their own stratosphere on this chart. But yet he's going to come in the NFL and continue to play at that high level. Like, you're not going to have that advantage. So that's why I don't think a lot of quarterbacks with teams that are that talented ever really work out. Like, look at USC's quarterbacks. I mean, who is the best one of that bunch? Carson Palmer? But would you even consider him to be like a legendary quarterback? Probably not. But he had that same type of level. Like Sanchez came in the league. Who else?
Leinart, Matt Barkley.
Yeah, Barkley. So like I think you're seeing the same thing with Alabama here, where a couple of guys have been sticking around the league, but really not that much. The one thing that kind of stood out, because I had some other ones. So this year, teams with the highest draft picks, Alabama and Ohio State both had 10. Georgia and Notre Dame had 9. And then Florida and Michigan both had 8. So you're looking at 3 of the teams from the college football playoffs in that top group. Clemson all the way down with number 5. So is it coaching for them? Some of their recruiting stuff, it hasn't really bumped up for them. A lot of people talk about how Clemson has all these All-Americans and all these guys, but they really don't have the depth that some of these other teams have. And that's where, like, if you look at what Harbaugh's done in Michigan, you could complain and say, all right, yeah, he kind of sucks. Team hasn't achieved, but they're one quarterback away. And I think it's been pretty clear that when they have a quarterback, he seems to always get injured. I don't understand why. Wilton Space, what? First year, Wilton Space hurt his shoulder, collarbone or something against Iowa. Then he breaks his neck or whatever happened against Purdue. Then McCaffrey comes in against Notre Dame, breaks his collarbone. It's like, what the hell? If they had one guy that could just like stay healthy that shows like a spark, I think last year you had, even Illinois, Brandon Peters played at Michigan, had a concussion issue, a couple injuries. Then last year, quarterback gets injured. Joe Milton transferred out anyway. So it's like they're very close to like what LSU is being, where I think the quarterback is the issue. Because if you're putting that many people in the NFL year over year, like you definitely have the talent. Last 5 years, Alabama, Ohio State, LSU, Michigan, and then Florida. Your boys, Florida, Matt, they're right there. But they're another one where is a quarterback for them? Because I didn't even mention it. Kyle Trask, Matt, perfect situation for him. He landed behind my man Tom Brady. What do you think about that?
I don't know. The jury's out. I don't know that where we'll see him.
Do you think he will be more successful than any Ohio State quarterback ever?
Well, you really set the bar low there.
Because I think, do they even have a playoff win? I don't know. We don't know, Matt. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but I know Tim Tebow does. So Kyle Trask could be at least Tim Tebow and be that successful. But watch him take over. What if he took over for Tom Brady and he won a Super Bowl right after? Wouldn't that just be crazy? And then I'll be saying, like, remember when I told you the Steelers should draft him and you laughed at me? And that's right. I said that before I even told them I didn't want them to draft a quarterback. I guess they could have drafted Kyle Trask. I would have laughed. But I do have some bad news for this, Matt, and this is my last thing before we wrap it up. There are some teams that have missed based on recruiting, underachieved. Ole Miss, Oregon, UCLA, Tennessee, of course Tennessee, Texas. So give an orange T logo, not a good look if you're trying to get to the NFL. And then the number 4 recruiting school, Florida State, hasn't produced. What do you think of that?
I mean, I'm not surprised to see them on there, but I think you also have to take into consideration how terrible things got at the end of Jimbo's tenure, leading into Taggart really not hitting anything recruiting-wise. I think hopefully we'll see over the next couple of years when Norvell gets his guys in that they're able to start pulling, because especially now with the flexibility of the transfer portal, there's no reason that they can't be pulling more people in, and the rebuild and rebound doesn't have to take as long as what it traditionally has taken teams to get back to where they need to be. For a program like Florida State, that when you look at, like, one of the bigger recruiting aspects is that you're in a state where the governor's pretty much just saying we're open. So going into this coming season, you're not going to have the mask mandate. The stadiums will be able to be at full capacity. If you're a recruit looking at, like, do I want to play at a 3-quarter filled Beaver Stadium or the Big House, or do I want to go down south where I can play in front of as many fans as will come to the game? Maybe it'll only be a third capacity because they're not playing good football, but at least the option to come will be there.
Well, looking at it, I want to say, as I was watching the draft, and I almost texted you, at one point, and maybe it finished this way, but there were more people that used to play at Florida State that got drafted than people that actually that graduated from Florida State and were drafted. Like, it seemed like every couple guys are like, started his career at Florida State, now with Alabama or somewhere. It's like, oh, okay. He was there one time.
Yeah, well, they processed a lot of people out from Taggart from when Jimbo Fisher left and Taggart came in. A lot of guys ended up leaving during that time period. So that makes sense in itself that they signed to play for Jimbo, and they realized it was going to be a completely different scheme, and a lot of them wanted to go elsewhere, which obviously with them getting drafted, it worked out for them. But looking at what ended up happening to the program, like, it's, as a fan, it was frustrating to see that how drastic the drop off was. Like, you go from winning the national championship in 2013 to 2 years later being like, do I really just lean into these 5-star heart jokes? I'm like, is that what we are? Like, it sucked, and it's definitely not at a standard that a spoiled college football fan I've become. But you look at those teams, and like, even during like what I would consider a down period, it's crazy that they're still you're still producing draft picks. I mean, with Samuel, I think was the first one off the board in the second round. That they're still putting guys in the league and being productive. So I like it.
Well, that was my joke with Michigan. I think I said towards you guys, they had to have had the most draft picks of a 2-win team of all time. Because, like, I know the coronavirus shortened the season, and if they played the full year, they were probably at least a 6-win team, 7, maybe 8, because they took all the cupcakes out, and then they didn't finish a couple of the other cupcake games. But I will say, like, you're putting players in the league, and it made me look at, like, Penn State. Penn State's doing worse than, like, Miami. And it's like, how? Like, you're talking about how Penn State's the second best team in Ohio State, or in the Big Ten behind Ohio State. Why aren't the numbers matching up? Like, why are you still so far behind Michigan in terms of, like, just talent on your roster? Because all it would take is maybe the shake-up of the staff this year. Maybe that will flip a switch, and maybe Michigan will come in. I know Harbaugh has been trying different things. Maybe it's just his outdated coaching scheme. They hire someone fresh to come in and just take that talent to the next level. But, like, with Penn State, it's almost like all the stuff you hear of James Franklin, great recruiter, all this stuff, but he's still so far behind the other two. It's like, all right, his results on the field, maybe he will look at USC, who's much higher on the list, but very, very underachieving. Like, they point out Florida State, Matt. USC's barely ahead of them, like 2 points. They weren't on that underachievers list. Why? They're just as shitty. They are just as shitty. Maybe they didn't have like the fall off that Florida State had, but USC has way more talent than anyone. The next team is like 50 points away from the Pac-12, and it's UCLA. Like, that's how far ahead USC is. It's ridiculous. But go ahead.
But I think like when you look at Florida State, they're hated by everyone. Like, they're not a program that, like,
not me,
because of the success that they've had. Like, they're typically thrown, like, they're never given the benefit of any doubt. It's always like when they win games, like even like we've joked 1,000 times about the Florida State Michigan game. It was never that they won. It was like, oh well, Jabril Peppers didn't play. Like, that was the whole talking point of the whole bowl game. That would have completely swung everything. You know?
It would have. That was barely a win by Florida State, Matt. Do you not remember that game?
I do remember that game.
That was like a 1-point win?
Yes. When Jimbo
Jabril
Fisher was
Peppers
nailing it
was
in.
worth at least 21 points. So if he played, that'd
That's
probably
where
be in
you
a
were
big
hearing
blow.
like speculating. Every opportunity be like, oh, Jimbo Fisher's leaving. He's out of here. He's going to LSU. He's going to Nebraska. He's going to Purdue. He's going anywhere. He's just trying to get out of there. Like trying to cause disruption within the program. And I think part of it's because for a lot of those older people that are now working for ESPN, they grew up and played in an era where they were dealing with Bowden's like consecutive year. Like it would basically be Saban's Alabama teams right now over like a 20-year period. So I think like it would definitely rub a lot of people the wrong way, and they look to just kick them as much as they can. But on the flip side of that, I think you also look at some of these recruiting rankings, and players get sometimes a little bit more of a bump than they deserve. And so then I think some of it, like if they didn't have that offer from certain schools, would they have the rankings that they're giving them? Because then I think that affects what those draft selections or different things look like. They're saying like, oh, he played at one school compared to another. He only had these smaller options. It may limit who's seeing him on film.
And that's true because the film aspect, but some of it, I don't know, because like a lot of it with like the potential of other leagues and stuff. And I know we should probably wrap up because we're going super long. But like even now, like the FCS championship is on TV. They're saying that the ratings are so low for them that it's very bad for the future of like the FCS on ESPN. But they drew 250,000 on ESPN2. That was North Dakota State's loss to James Madison. And it was the least watched game with the Bison since 2011. So,
Sam Houston State.
wait, what was that?
They played Sam Houston State.
Oh, yeah, it does say
weekend.
Sam Houston State. I don't know why that says James Madison. All right. But anyway, yeah, I could just be reading it wrong. But over 250,000, like, who cares? Like, that's still pretty good for spring football from a league that most people don't even know exists, most likely. Like, I think they said that the highest game had 328,000 viewers on ESPN. But, like, the NBA game on ABC, regular television, not ESPN, had 1.6 million. Like, that's not that much more for an actual pro game. Like, a million something more? Like, who cares? So, like, you're comparing whatever on there. And just to show you, an NBA game between Toronto and Los Angeles in the same time slot drew 440,000. So they drew like 100,000 more. An actual NBA game. So what's the difference? Like, who cares if it didn't draw as much? I'm pretty sure ESPN doesn't care because of how high their TV ratings were. But I just wanted to bring that up as the last thing. Getting to my final bell too, I wanted to mention, because you brought up Nick Saban's thing, that Alabama's not even anywhere near on like the NFL draft's all-time list. Michigan and USC have had a player drafted every year since 1939. And I bring that up because Michigan State this year didn't have a player drafted the first time since 1941. So Michigan, meanwhile, had an even awful season, lost to Michigan State, still had, 8 people drafted? And then Michigan State has 0. So Harbaugh, come on, bro. That's embarrassing. That is very embarrassing that you lost to that team. And then the next streaks, your team at Florida, the Gators, 1952, Miami, the Hurricanes, 1975, and then Iowa, 1978, the streaks that are still alive. Notre Dame has like some supplemental drafting they always put out, like, hey, we've had a player since every year since like 1930 something if you count the supplemental draft of 1977. I'm like, who's counting the supplemental draft? Like, apparently only Notre Dame fans. But I was curious because I'm like, when did Alabama not have players drafted? But apparently right before Nick Saban got there, they had a pretty bad run there. players not being drafted, not winning games. So he definitely built that up very fast. I mean, they were losing to really bad teams his first year anyway. So that's all I had. Anything else you wanted to hit on? Those are my big things.
No, I mean, you kind of hit on the last piece that I was looking at was with the FCS games, because that Sam Houston State North Dakota State game was a phenomenal matchup, and it went down to the wire. And for the first time since 2010, it marks the first time that the Bison are not playing in the championship. I think it's shame on ESPN for not pushing more, but I don't know that they want to have the FCS games be successful in the spring. I think this was kind of like a stop, like they got their games in, but it's like force it to have where everyone's playing in the fall is I think the name of the game. They don't want it to be where they're spreading things out and drawing away from the NBA because of their ridiculous bid on their contract. Because I think they could have, if they wanted to put the emphasis there, they could have put more marketing out there and done more with the season to try to draw more interest for people, if for nothing more than to increase the amount of interest in the playoffs. Because we talk about expanding it from 4 to 8 to whatever. The FCS playoffs make it work. And they end up with a lot of teams within that level that make the playoffs, and you get some good games out of it.
That's maybe something we can look at in the coming weeks because I know we wanted to talk about that anyway. But yeah, that's a good point. It is on TV now. I don't think that they really want it to be in the spring in the future. So I think the TV ratings kind of point to that direction. But yeah, you're right. I haven't seen them advertise it. I didn't even know it was on ESPN. I thought it's still on ESPN, like whatever. I think a lot of them have been on ESPNU anyway. So just the fact that they're on ESPN2 is something different. And if they're not that far behind the NBA, like you said, they paid how much money for those NBA ones that are drawing that low? Like less than 500,000 people? They're putting billions of dollars into it. The FCS one, they probably threw them, what, a couple grand? Like, they're not paying them billions of dollars for that contract anyway.
Well, and I'll take it a step further. And when you look at what they're doing, a lot of the games this season, like this spring, were games that were on the ESPN Plus. It wasn't even on like ESPN 2 or 3. It was like you had to go to the special pay site to even access some of the games. And even at that, there were times where like the quality of the games being broadcast was absolute trash. I was very disappointed.
That's because ESPN's not actually doing them. Like, it goes to the school. And the schools don't have enough money because ESPN's not paying them to do it. So it's kind of like a catch-22. That's why it took so long for the ACC network to come out, because ESPN made them put all that stuff in. I think this is a long time ago, but I want to say whenever that ACC contract came out, the only campus that had the technology available was NC State, just because of the triangle and like being in Raleigh. Like, they had all of like the fiber and stuff needed. Every other school had to go through like major renovations, and I think NC State ended up going through renovations anyway. But like none of the other schools had like their own facility to even have the technology to do TV broadcasts before that. So if they didn't have them, like if North Carolina, Duke, Florida State, like if they didn't have that stuff, there's no way North Dakota State has it. So that's why I think you see the broadcast quality that you see. But that's it. Thanks for listening. I know we went kind of long, but big topic, the NFL draft. We'll be getting into some other football stuff in the coming weeks, maybe looking at some NHL and some baseball stuff. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.